Does anyone remember when it was presented? So the first one was navigating the complex, and the second one was the complex and Daniel 11:41. And when were they presented?
(2022)
Yep, do you remember the dates?
February 18th.
Yep, the second one was at February 18th.
February 11th is the first.
Yep.
I did the math.
And thank you. So whenever we read a quote from the Bible or Ellen G. White, we like to look at the context. So does anyone remember the context around these two videos? Like what was happening externally and internally around this time?
The war between Russia and Ukraine.
Yep, that was happening externally. How about internally? Like, what was the presentation Elder Tess was doing right before she presented Vespers?
Conflicting ethos, something like that.
It was more about the politics of evasion and the Laodicean state of the movement, if you remember.
Okay, I remember.
Yeah. So this was after these Vespers were done right after that. So now let's look at these titles. Navigating the complex. What do you think, like what comes to mind when you hear the word navigating?
The
Trying
bearing
to
of a
find your way
compass.
through.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So like when you navigate something, what do you need?
You're trying to find your, oh, sorry. I was going to say you're trying to find your way, but
Yeah,
Unless
what
the-
do you
A
Unless it
map.
said compass.
Oh,
Yeah, a compass, or what do we usually use nowadays when we try to find our way around some location we don't know?
Google Maps.
Yep, maps. Yeah, so in this case, what is helping us navigate the complex? What is the map?
The simple
Yes.
parables. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And what is the complex?
The reality
Right.
of what's actually happening.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was looking for. So we are using the simple, so like prophecy or parables, to help us navigate the complex, which is our history or reality. And for the second video, the complex in Daniel 11:41, it's telling us that we need to understand the complexity of history to see Daniel 11:41 being fulfilled. And Elder Tess was specifically discussing the complex to especially see proms on the left. So in like the first and second videos in the first part, she was talking about how to understand the simple versus the complex. Like some people were mentioning like 3D lines or like using a magnifying glass. But do you have any other ways to understand the complex versus the simple?
Talking about sifting articles? No.
Like kind of seeing the overall picture, like Elder Tess was saying, the lines has to be kind of 3D. We can't just take it simplistically and still match it up with the complex. And other people are saying using a magnifying glass, so like zooming in into the simple, and then that's the way to understand the complex. And then another person mentioned like color printing. like when you see an image, it looks like a beautiful picture, but when you zoom into it, you can see all the pixels inside. So do you have any other ways to understand?
Are you referring to the waymarks or the simple? And the actual history is the complex.
Yeah. Oh, I was just kind of gathering thoughts from what the people in the Vespers were saying. So another thing other tests was saying to think of it like glass slides, like building a model with one simple slide and building it up, and then you can see the complexity. And also like layers in a story, like you tell one way of looking at history and another way, and then putting it all together, we understand this complex history. And I was thinking about like childish versus adult thinking. So like in the past we use very childish, like simple models, but now we are beginning to think of it as it's more complex. And yes, mathematics, like yes, building up from the simple and going to the complex. And a point other tests brought up was that the simple is easy to distort, but it is still accurate. And it gives an anchor in our complex history. So she listed out several ways, several histories where we have a simple like a simple model, but then there's a complex history around that. And there were several, and what were they?
Trumpets?
Yep. And what was the complex history that the trumpets are used to explain?
The history of the downfall of Rome.
Western and Eastern Rome.
Yes, the sack of Rome. Anything else?
The 1888 history.
Uh-huh. Um, I like to put it as the Minneapolis General Conference, where like Elder Tess mentioned, like we have simple phrases to explain that history, like Butler and Smith rejected the prophets, but then the history around it is much more complex. And what else? She mentioned like 2 or 3 more.
Daniel 8.
I don't remember mentioning that, but we could put that down. So what would you put as the complex?
Okay, so the simple was, it was just 22 years was skipped in that between 8 something and Daniel 9. And then the complex was all the Diadochi Wars.
Oh yeah. Yep, that's perfect. And anything else?
I have written here history of moral majority.
So that was used to take us from the right to the left, and we'll get to that soon. How about Martin Luther versus the Pope? That was the simple, but what was this used to, what was the bigger history around this?
Reformation.
Yep. And if I give you the first advent, what was the simple?
John the Baptist, Zacharias.
Yep, John the Baptist versus who? John the Baptist versus Pharisees, that's like a simple model, but then the accomplice is the first abbot. And also there was the Sunday law. So Sunday law, like it's a simple concept, but then other tests puts on all these layers of that we have to understand LGBT and gender. And that is an overview of simple versus complex. So there was another one, good versus evil. So I'm gonna describe it as, this is a shorter one. So what are like the several good versus evil parables we have and information that makes it more complex?
She was talking about the King of the North, King of the South, Calvinists versus the Pope, the North and South in the Civil War.
Yes, exactly. So there's a simple parable, but then I just call it a complicating factor, or more information shows us it's not that simple. So Alyssa mentioned Luther versus Pope.
No, she had mentioned Calvinists, not
Yeah,
Luther.
yeah. So like Luther versus Pope is like simple. Those are the Luther's good, Pope is bad. But when we look at the people on the Reformation, Protestant Reformation, like Calvin, like we can see that side was not all that good. Does that make sense? And then there's North versus South in the Civil War, and then the complicating factor is Abraham Lincoln. When we dive into his history, he was not really for total racial equality. And then right wing versus left wing, just simple good versus evil, where left is good, right is bad, but the complicating information comes when we go through the Vespers. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, we'll keep going. So other tests mentioned that we need to read laterally. And why do we need to do that?
To sift the left-wing sources and find out what percentages of the articles are correct and what percent is not.
Yes. So the reason why we need to read laterally is to understand the complexity of history, but then how to read laterally is to sift sources or cherry pick. So elder tests explained how she would take bits from articles that she agreed with, and then she would discard anything she didn't agree with. So like we are using this message to know what is right or what is wrong in the articles we read. And also she mentioned that the left side is not all that correct and has some issues. And then she mentioned that democracy now. And the next idea she talked about was what moved us from right to left. Like there were 4 histories that moved us from left to right. What were they? Anyone, do you remember?
I cry message one.
I
Moral
have written-
majority, moral majority,
Yeah.
and Ipsos.
Yes, these are all the Midnight Cry message. So Bob was correct. Yes, the first one was moral majority. What was the second one?
Ipsos.
Yep, Pyrrhus and Ipsus. And the third one,
I forgot.
Line of the Nethinims.
that was the fourth one. What's the third? It was like the biggest part of the Midnight Cry message.
Gender.
Info?
Yeah. Troy said 2 streams of information.
Yes, understanding 1996. So, could somebody go over each of these and tell more specifically how these lines moved us from right to left? So, like, how did the history of moral majority turn us from right to left?
Well,
They
showed
weren't
us that,
for equality.
Go ahead, Kathy, please.
Oh, well, they weren't for equality, basically, and they were very conservative. I can remember right now.
Linda, do you have anything else to say?
well, showed us the negative aspects of everything they were doing. It's basically what I was gonna say.
Right, like it showed us the true nature of the right, like they were trying to get into politics and like combining church and state. Now, how about Paris and Ipsus? How does understanding Paris and Ipsus make us change our political spectrum from the right to the left?
Well, I'm thinking about the election in 2016. No, if that's true or not, but about Putin and Trump, you know.
Yes, I was like thinking about like these lines were the ones that truly showed us the first lines to show us the King of the South, and it showed this geographical model where the King of the North is church over state, but the King of the South is state over church, but now we aren't either. And I think the third one is pretty easy to see. So understanding 1996 showed us the 2 streams of information and showed us there's a correct stream and an incorrect stream of information, both internally and externally, and it showed us which side we should choose. And how about the fourth one?
Is it all right if I just make a quick comment on number 2, Ipsos?
Yes, please. I think I confused it.
Because Ipsos was the 2016 election, as you said, and Ipsos, Antigonus was the last chance to unite the kingdom. And so that just showed that Clinton prophetically was the correct candidate for America rather than Trump.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. And the fourth one, line of methonyms.
So that one showed that they get their first, second, and I think third messages from external sources only. So therefore the 2 streams are so important.
Yeah, so like if the methonyms are being prepared for harvest, like who is preparing them when we aren't? And other tests said there should be a true external information that they're listening to, and That's how they're becoming prepared. And I want to prepare another table like we did. So like more specifically, tailored to this movement. So what did we used to believe when we were on the right, and what do we believe now that we are on the left? Like what is so different about our beliefs and values now that we switched?
You mean like the Bible? We used to believe in a literal versus now parable methodology.
Okay, we could go with that. So like, right, when we were on the right, we used to take the Bible very literally, and now we take it spiritually. Anything else? What is the big one? What was the biggest shift in our thinking?
Gender equality, sexism and homophobia.
Yes, so let's just put it as feminism versus patriarchy. How about what were the two terms that we or other tests later on used to describe the left and the right? I think it will still apply to this, how we think as a movement. Those two keywords.
Liberal conservative?
We could put that. Liberal versus
You mean freedom and equality? Is that what you want?
yes. Anything else? So like let's think about how the movement used to be governed and now. So equality versus freedom. So what was the leadership under Elder Jeff versus Elder Perminder? Oh, somebody. Yep. So like I guess we could parallel with the government size. So like under Elder Pippinger, what was the government like? Was it big or small?
Small.
Yes, very small. And when Elder Perminder came, he made it
Big.
yes. Put more people in leadership, made it more organized. And any other terms to describe the change in our thinking? Yes, exactly, Troy. I was also thinking of inclusive versus exclusive. How about how we think about us versus the world?
You mean special versus non-special?
Yes, what are the terms like politicians use?
Globalist.
Yes, exactly. Versus?
I forget.
Unilateralism?
Nationalist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was thinking of nationalism, but that is also correct. All right, so that's all I have. Do you have any other thoughts? And we'll go on. We'll keep going.
We're now focusing more on the 6, not the 4.
Mhm. So 6 commandments, which is other Parmenter used to say, being humanist versus ideological. Anything else? Okay, so other has kept on using other ways to discuss the simple versus the complex. And a story she used was seeing the World War parables versus Putin at that time, where he was building up and mobilizing to attack Ukraine. So she drew a line of the World War and she talked about how in 1945 Stalin or like Hitler died. So 1945 lines up with 2021 and 22. And that is when Hitler dies. And then afterwards there's a Cold War. And then so this is not exactly lining up. So like she also showed, okay, it's not exactly lining up, but she also showed 2019 where there's another death of a dictator. And can someone explain the dilemma they were trying to discuss as I draw these lines?
Well, Hitler actually was dead, and Putin's still alive. Is that what it was?
Yes. So the dictator dies at 1945, and also Trump dies at 2019. But then in reality, the complex is showing that they actually seem to be getting stronger. So how would you explain that?
There's a change of behavior. There's not an actual death.
Right. So did you have anything else to say?
I think they become more authoritarian, like, more tyrants.
Yes. So if we just looked at the simple, we'll be kind of confused because the dictator seems to be getting stronger. But then we have to understand the complex and know that death in prophecy in the simple just means change of behavior. Okay, and that was one way she discussed simple versus complex. Another way she talked about was the prophecy of the first advent. Prophecy of the first advent. So if nobody has anything to discuss about this topic, we'll move on. She also drew Sunday law here. After the core, there's a Sunday law. Okay. All right, so let's move on. So can someone read Luke 1:67 through 79? So Luke 1:67 through 79, please.
Luke 1, what verse? Sorry.
67 through 79, please.
67 through. Oh, where is it?
I've got it.
Okay.
And his father Zacharias was filled with the Holy Ghost and prophesied, saying, Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for he hath visited and redeemed his people, and hath raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he spake by the mouth of his holy prophets, which have been since the world began, that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all that hate us, to perform the mercy promised to our fathers and to remember his holy covenant, the oath which he sware to our father Abraham, that he would grant unto us that we, being delivered out of the hand of our enemies, might serve him without fear, in holiness and righteousness before him all the days of our life. You said to 79?
Yes, please.
And thou, child, shall be called the prophet of the holy of the highest, for thou shalt go before the face of the Lord to prepare his ways, to give knowledge of salvation unto God's people by the remission of their sins, through the tender mercy of God, of our God, whereby the day spring from on high hath visited us, to give light to them that sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace.
Thank you. So what is the image that comes to your mind when you read these verses? Like, what's the impression that you get? What are you imagining that it will be like?
The conquering power that God is going to save God's people from the hands of the enemies, conquer Rome.
Right. It's like so poetic. Like you can't, you might, if you heard, like if you were there and you were listening to Zacharias, you will be thinking, oh, we are gonna have a conquering king that will save us from the Romans and deliver us from all the enemies. But then what was reality?
Different enemies.
Right.
Jesus came
Well,
to vanquish the enemy of Satan and to cleanse the world of the sin, rather than toppling government powers.
right. So Elder Tess was mentioning the enemy that John the Baptist and Jesus came to save us from were ourselves. And yeah, you can see the simple versus the complex. Like the simple is showing such a beautiful picture, but the reality is not really like that. Okay, let's go on to so Elder Tess was kind of going through the complex and it explained more about how our Sunday law will look like. So could somebody read Daniel 11:41 for us?
He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon.
Yes, thank you. So what do you think? What are you imagining these verses is gonna be like? Like, what's the impression that you get?
Armies coming in and having battles.
Yeah, like literally, it seems like somebody's just invading a country and just lots of and just conquering. But how does overdrawing look like? So I'm gonna draw a line of the 144,000 first and the priest, and Elder Tess made a really great point about what the overdrawing looks like or when it is. So our first waymark is 144,000. Let's see. So what is, just talk me through this. So what is our first waymark?
1989.
And the second one,
2001,
yes. And then
Sunday Law,
Sunday Law, close of probation, second Advent, and then we have all these little details. So what is between 9/11 and Sunday Law?
Increase of knowledge and formalization by 2019 and 2021.
Yes, perfect. So our increase of knowledge was 2019, and what was our increase of knowledge?
Feminism.
Yes. And 2021 was what?
Radical
Radical
feminism.
feminism.
Yes. So formalization was radical feminism. And what happens between 2021 and Sunday Law? Who is harvested?
The church.
So there's two parts to the church.
You mean the Levites?
Yes. There's the harvest of the Levites. And what is this period in the line of agriculture?
Early rain.
Formerly.
Perfect. All right, let's go to the priest line because it's gonna help us know more about what the 144,000 line is doing. So I'm just gonna put this down real quick. 1989, 2001, and this is where it begins to diverge. What was the Sunday Law for the priests?
2014,
Yep. What was the probation?
2019,
November 9, 2019, and Penny, when was that?
2021.
Okay, so there's also two waymarks in each of these dispensations. So between 1989 and 2001, what was the, I guess, the increase of knowledge and formalization?
online,
Daniel 11:40. 45.
Yes. So the first one was line upon line, and the second one was Daniel 11,
Oh, yeah.
40 to 45. And then the test came right here. And how about the next dispensation?
25:20.
Yes. 2520, and the formalization.
Time setting.
Time setting, and then here comes the test. And how about the next one?
Acts 27,
Yes. Acts 27, and what was the formalization?
Two streams.
Perfect. And again, the test comes here. And then November 9 was the Shator or the cross for the priest. And then how about this dispensation?
Peaceful and LGBT.
Yes, so I'm just gonna put A, B here. So I'm running out of space. And LGBT and then test. So Elder Test got this pattern from Boston Concord Exeter, increase of knowledge, formalization, and then test. So seeing that parallel, seeing the parallel, let me choose a different color. So seeing the parallel between right here and this side and this line and this line, and also think about Daniel 11:41. When are the many overthrown?
Sunday law.
Formalization.
Yes, it was formalization. And that was the big point she was making. So where would I put this word? Over which way mark?
Sunday law?
Over here or over here?
2021.
Yes. So, and then other tests said that like every shaking since 2019 was about radical feminism. So like the overthrowing is happening right now. And she also said like there was no world peace, like externally there will be no world peace after Sunday law, even though we might think from a simplistic model like the US will be the king of the world after the Sunday law. But then in reality, Putin is being bolstered by his allies like China and North Korea. So in this period, it's still gonna look very complicated. There was a quote that I wanted to read, so let's see. It was something that in the video Catherine was mentioning, and they didn't have the quote, but I want to read it. So counsels for the church, 340.5. Could somebody really quick find it? Or I could paste in the chat, whatever. Or I could just read it.
You want the whole thing read?
Yes, please.
In vision, I saw two armies in terrible conflict. One army was led by banners bearing the world's insignia. The other was led by the blood-stained banner of Prince Emmanuel. Standard after standard was left to trail in the dust as company after company from the Lord's army joined the foe, and tribe after tribe from the ranks of the enemy united with the commandment-keeping people of God. An angel flying in the midst of heaven put the standard of Emmanuel into many hands, while a mighty general cried out with a loud voice, "Come into line, let those who are loyal to the commandments of God and the testimony of Christ now take their position. Come out from among them and be ye separate, and touch not the unclean. And I will receive you and will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters. Let all who will come up to the help of the Lord, against the mighty."
Thank you. So that is Ellen G. White's version of, I guess, how many countries being overthrown but these shall escape. So like company after company from the Lord's army joined the foe, which is many countries shall be overthrown. But then tribe after tribe from the ranks of the enemy united with the commandment keeping people of God. So even these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. So that is how it looks like for many to be overthrown. All right, so that's all I have. Do you have any other thoughts or questions?
I have had a thought. So since no Levites or Nethinims are coming out, is it adding confusion if we keep writing that they're being harvested?
I think that's a question for another person more expert in this to answer.
It was a big question, but it just came to mind.
So I'm thinking, if you do literal to spiritual, in the agricultural model, you still have a harvest time. And, you know, the Bible says things like pray that it be plentiful and all of that. So I guess it's not going to be plentiful. In fact, it's not going to be anything, you know, according to what you just said. But you can still put it there as a dispensation, I'm thinking.
Just as long as we're aware that we're not to expect people, or very many, hardly any.
I guess so. It's going to look the same as it would on the line of the Levites. You'd still draw the agricultural model, put the harvest time, dispensation, and just say, unfortunately, they failed as a group.
Right, okay.
One thing, just a thought off the top of my head, maybe I shouldn't, but I think we gave the midnight cry, I'll say, to the Levites. Even, I know we weren't invited to churches or anything like that, but we had all our messages up on YouTube. Surely God directed some Levites to those videos, and those Levites would have not been interested, not followed up, and failed. So if that's true, because it might not be, but I wonder if somehow we still give a loud cry, but no Nethinims join. Just a thought, I really don't know.
I guess just to, yeah, go ahead.
What he was saying earlier made me think of Noah's Ark and how few people finally got on the Ark compared to how many people were exposed to the message.
That's where I was gonna go, Linda.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but the glorious manifestation of God was the animals getting on the ark, and they didn't get on the ark. So in theory, you still have those three groups, but only Noah and his family got on the ark, which is the 144,000, unfortunately. The others, they saw the glory, but they didn't get on the ark. That's how I see it.
But another thing that we learned was that all the priests come in. Our close of probation was, November 9, 2019. But for the Levites and Nethinims, they can come in all the way to the close of probation of the 144,000 lines. So yeah, we don't know how God would lead individually. Yeah, so keep an open minded here.
I try to look at it with the perspective of looking at before this movement, God raised up this movement, God's Spirit had a way still of deciding each case of everyone who lived prior to whether their hearts were in line with being in the first resurrection or whether they were going to be lost for eternity. And I can't help but think, maybe it's wishful thinking, but I'm thinking that there are people at some level that the truths that are being taught right now by the movement and through the movement, I think that there are those who are resonating. They're resonating with it, but they're not actually.
Oh, I think they got cut off.
So just another quick thought, because I think Troy in the chat said something about what does the statue of Daniel 2, the bringing down of the statue of Daniel 2 look like, some reference to that. So I'm wondering if what I just said, that we do still give the loud cry, just the problem is no Nethinims accept it as a group, then you could still, in theory, have that stone hitting the feet, bring down Babylon, or could you? Does it have to be accepted by a whole bunch of people to gain popularity to bring down the statue? Because it just seems odd to me that prophecies like the stone hitting the feet are conditional, and it's just not going to happen because the Nephilim have failed. Or is it Revelation 17, that the 10 kings shall make war with the Lamb and the Lamb shall overcome? Or Daniel 11, tidings out of the east and the north shall trouble. I never thought of those as conditional prophecies that might not happen. So I'm struggling to think, if we don't give the loud cry, what happens? Babylon doesn't come down? So I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts.
Well, I was kind of thinking along the lines of Noah, where they weren't separate while they're building the ark. The other townspeople, whomever were in that area, they were exposed to the process. So I think that it's going to be hard for us to be separate from people and not impact them in some way. It just doesn't mean that they'll accept it.
Also, like, let us not forget our message. And our message forward right now is like radical feminism. And to think about that, we are focusing on dismantling patriarchy. And if you ask yourself right now, like, how many people in the world have that ideology that they want to dismantle patriarchy? Actually, it is really few people that want to do that. And if that is the message we are going to give to the world, then expect only those who have that idea of dismantling patriarchy that are going to join in. And we will not be surprised when it comes down to the time of no. So, thanks.
Any other thoughts?
There's another comment in the chat.
So Mary was asking, does the ark comprise only of this literal group, or is there a larger spiritual movement? What about the two streams and the external prophets? Where are they directing people to go into? I don't know about the answer, but I can just comment on it. I guess this is a good example of how we have this very simplistic model, but that we're trying to make sense with the complexity of reality. But does anyone else have a better answer?
The only thing that came to my mind was that the external sources are largely Catholic. What's his name? Michael Moore and AOC are Catholic. So I don't know. I mean, even if we're looking at the external news sources, I don't see anyone directing anyone towards the movement.
Yeah, the counterfeit.
So what do we believe now, as of now, as far as does the world ever find out about us, or how do we interact with the world any further than YouTube videos? Where do we stand on that at this point?
Oh, yeah. So in the presentation before these Vespers were the politics of evasion and Laodicea, Elder Tess was saying like kind of pointing at people who are in Laodicea were the ones trying to go to the Levites, but they were not actually working on themselves. Like they didn't see the sexism in themselves. So I guess doing a work on yourself more. Hope that helps.
I'll have to go back and watch.
All right, any other thoughts? Okay, so just wrapping up, I just want to repeat this point where so we see in this is that the formalization where people begin to or where there's a shaking, so that's how we line up with this 2021 as the overthrowing where many are overthrown. And all right, so I'm gonna close with prayer. Dear God, thank you for the Sabbath day. Thank you for the chance to discuss the truths you've given us. May we treasure them and live up to them. Help us to be refreshed by this day of rest and through your messages. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Thank you. Happy Sabbath.